Turn that light on, honey.
Start off by asking what branch you in and what rank you were.
Okay, I was in the U.S. Air Force, and I retired as a full colonel.
Okay. And what did you do in the war?
In the war?
In the Vietnam War.
In Vietnam. The year that I was in Vietnam, I was a navigator on a C-123 aircraft, which is a twin-engine, prop-driven engine, and we resupplied and dropped supplies to some of the Army camps around in the mountains, and also we dropped paratroopers on occasion when they had need to. A couple of times we did down in the Delta, which is the southern part of Vietnam, dropped paratroopers. And one of my favorite spots over there was a little village on the edge of Cambodia, the Cambodia-Vietnam border, and it was called Budop, B-U-D-O-P, Budop. And you could tell when any of the guys had been to Budop because when they came back, their boots were all red because the dirt there was really red, kind of like in Oklahoma. You been to Oklahoma?
Not yet.
They have red dirt there too. But yeah, and so I was a navigator, and we got to go and see an awful lot of Vietnam because we could land at all those places. The guys that flew fighters only got to see the base that they took off from because then they would come back there, usually.
Mm-hmm.
But we got to go all over the country, saw a lot more than they did.
Mm-hmm. When you joined the military, were you drafted or were you enlisted when the Vietnam War started?
Well, it's interesting how I got into the Air Force because I had a friend who I went to college with. The first year was a freshman, and we didn't go back for the second year. We dropped out of college, and I went to work pumping gas at my dad's gas station, and my friend went to work at a bank as a teller, and he started taking flying lessons at the local airport, and he kept bugging me all the time. Hey, Dave, come on and take flying lessons with me. It's a lot of fun. I said, I don't have enough money to do that. And he kept bugging me, and then he came up with this deal about going to take the aviation cadet exams to go into the Air Force. And so finally, more or less to shut him up, I said, okay, I'll go with you. So we went to the bus in Syracuse, New York, and took the preliminary examinations and everything. And then we passed that, and we went on over to Geneva, New York, which was a Sampson Air Force Base, for the more advanced testing. And it's at that point that he found out he was colorblind. He never knew that he was.
Oh, God.
And so he didn't make it, and I did. I passed all the stuff, and so I was at a point in my life where I was anxious to do something, get out of town, and I said, how soon can you take me if I sign on the dotted line? He said, 30 days. I said, okay, let's go. And I was gone in about 30 days. And so that's how I got into the Air Force. I'd actually always wanted to go into the Navy because my uncle was a pilot in World War II for the Navy. And he was always kind of my idol. But I just got off to the side and ended up in the Air Force.
When you went to Vietnam, do you remember your first day there?
Oh, yeah, it was hot. It was sticky. And we got in there, and then we had to find a place to live because they didn't have quarters on the base. And so we had to go in town and find an apartment to rent. And I rented an apartment with, there were two other guys, there were three of us that rented an apartment in downtown Saigon. And that's where we lived while I was there, and flew out of Tan Son Nhut Air Base, which is right on the outskirts of Saigon. So hot and sticky, those are my most vivid memories of that first day in Vietnam.
What were the most memorable experiences that you had there?
Probably when President Diem was overthrown, they had a military coup. And you probably don't remember this because this happened in 1963. And we were at the base, and we heard that there was an uprising coming, and they advised everybody that wasn't on the flying schedule to get back to their apartments or wherever they lived and lay low until we heard from them. Well, we got back there, and our apartment, like I said, was in downtown Saigon. And well, they had the Army, which are the ones that conducted the coup, were down in the streets. They had the tanks down there, and the bullets were going back and forth. And we were out there on a balcony, and I think we were on the 3rd floor of that apartment building, and it was pretty exciting because you could hear every once in a while, whoosh, whoosh, hear a bullet go right by us. So we went back inside.
What was the most stressful assignment that they assigned you?
Probably dropping paratroopers.
Paratrooper?
Yeah, because you had to be so exact on, where you, because if you dropped them in the wrong place, then the whole operation was, would backfire. So that was probably the most stressful because you had to be right on the money to do that.
Yeah. Was there something you did for good luck or had that you carried with you for good luck?
I guess I didn't.
No.
No.
What about what did y'all do to entertain yourselves?
Well, to occupy ourselves and entertain ourselves are two different things. But while I was over there, I took a correspondence course because I had not finished my college yet. This aviation cadet program that I went into, you didn't have to have a degree, but you had to pass all of their tests and everything. And so I was working on that quite a bit at the time, and I guess basically that's pretty much it. And eating, we ate at a lot of restaurants in town, and the French were there long before we were, and there was a large French influence in Vietnam. And so they had a lot of French restaurants around, which were pretty good. But one time when I went to Nha Trang, which is about halfway up the coast of Vietnam towards Nha Trang, that's, what did I say it was? Not Nha Trang. Anyway, we were there for about 3 weeks, and we were flying out of this base up the coast, and we were resupplying army troops that were up in the mountains. And that's where I got to boot up from quite a bit. And I had some soup one night at one of the restaurants, and it made me deathly ill. And it put me in a hospital for about 3 days there at the 8th Army Field Hospital in Nha Trang. So eating out had its drawbacks at times.
Did you keep a personal diary or something to write about your experiences? Or
I kept a little log of my flights, my flying time that I flew, and where we went and that sort of thing. Kept track of the number of hits that our airplanes took, because mostly it was small fire over there at that time. But when you were dropping supplies into these fields in the jungle or wherever they happened to be, a lot of times they were right on the edge of a river, which is a natural place to put a camp, And a lot of times when you'd come in and drop, the bad guys would be on the other side of the river, and they would take pop shots at you when you came off the target, after you dropped your supplies and stuff. So we picked up a few bullets, in the airplane now and then. I recorded those.
Oh, okay. Do you recall the day the service ended, and where were you when the Vietnam War ended?
Well, when it ended, I was back.
You were back?
Back here in the States.
Okay.
But I had been into it right up and near the end because I was stationed in Oklahoma then, and we were flying tankers at the time, KC-135s, and we would have to go over to Thailand on TDY, they call it, which stands for temporary duty. And we would fly out of there and we'd support the fighter aircraft, the bomber aircraft, which were still bombing in Vietnam. And so we were there. The last one time we were there, I think, was 1973, and that's the year that it all ended up, I believe. But at the time it actually ended, I was back in the States in Oklahoma.
What did you do when you returned home from Vietnam?
In my what?
What did you do when you returned home?
Oh, when I was sent home?
Yes.
Kissed my wife.
Fair enough. How was the welcome home when you came home from Vietnam?
Oh, it was great. We had 3 children, and we didn't talk I was over there 11 months at one stretch, And I was supposed to, when I took the assignment to go to Vietnam, it was for a year. But at the 6-month point, when you were there on a year's tour, they gave you a choice. They said you could go R&R, which is rest recuperation, but you couldn't go out of the theater. We could go to Australia, which I'd always wanted to do. But you could do that, take your 30 days R&R, or you could go home a month early. So I took the month early, and I just stayed over there for solid 11 months. And back then, they didn't have telephones and computers and all that communication that they have now. So I didn't talk to my wife until I was about midway through the tour. And one time I was in Hong Kong. We used to take our airplanes up to Hong Kong, where they did their heavy maintenance on them, and our scheduled maintenance inspections and so on. And I was up there, and a telephone was available, so I called her. We talked then, and then when I came back, she met me in Chicago, and and then we had a reunion in Chicago, and then went home after about 3 or 4 days. Met up with the kids, and then we headed for California.
Did you, the friends that you met in Vietnam, did you keep in touch with any of them?
Not Vietnam per se, but in Thailand. I did. I had a real good friend. As a matter of fact, he was my best friend for 60 years, and he just died this year. And he and I flew together over in Thailand when we were over there. But we'd gone through aviation cadets together from 1956 when I went into service. We'd been friends all that time and stayed in close contact. Real good friends.
How did you attend any reunions when you, like Vietnam, like with
I
the
didn't
others?
attend any Vietnam reunions. I attended a couple of unit reunions that we had after I retired, but not necessarily Vietnam.
And how did your service affect your life, like during the Vietnam War? How did the war affect your life?
Well, it gave me a lot of self-confidence. I was very self-confident after that, and knew I could do just about anything that I set my mind to. So that was a very positive reaction. I know some people come back a mess, but
Not you.
it did good. It did me good. Except being away from the family, I didn't like that. But
How about the conditions in Vietnam?
the conditions in Vietnam, this is 1963, 1964. You know, you're talking 60 years ago now. Well, 50. And back then, like I said, they didn't have telephone communications or computers or any of that stuff. It was pretty basic, pretty old. They didn't have running water in a lot of places. They didn't have bathrooms in a lot of places. No toilets like we see them in the houses. They didn't have that. But those are mainly the civilians there. The Vietnamese people. Of course, the military. We did all right. We had accommodations that we're pretty much used to. So it wasn't all that bad, except for the communication business.
How are the Vietnamese? Did you meet any of the Vietnamese people?
Yeah, we had our landlord, and I've forgotten what his name was now. But we talked frequently with him. He could speak fairly good English, and we got along pretty good. But other than that, not really.
Not really.
And you want me to go on? We also spent 2 years in Korea with my family. I took my family there with me. We had 4 children then, and that was a great experience for the kids because they were all small. The youngest was 4, and the oldest was 12 when we got back, I think. So he was 11 when we went over there. And that's quite an education for a young person like that, to see that part of the world. Now, talk about your backward ways. That was Korea back then. But now they're making great cars. The Kia, they're making great TVs like the LG and the LG well, that's not an LG refrigerator, but they're making all those appliances, and they are really of good quality. And we did meet a lot of the people there, because I was in an advisory group, and I was an advisor to the commander for maintenance, over their aircraft maintenance. And so we got invited into their social arena at times, you know, to dinner out, and that was quite an experience. You know, you take your shoes off when you walk in the door, and, you know, a lot of bowing. It was very nice. That little, see on that little table there, that, I'll get this thing, this was, the table is called lacquered, has a lacquered finish. And this is one of the things that was given to us when we left Korea. And it's really quite pretty. And it's brass, and it has a lacquered finish, and you can see all the inlay. What do they call that? Pearl? Not pearl? Something like that. What is that called?
Mother of pearl.
Mother of pearl, yeah.
Lacquer, black lacquer.
Yeah, and the chest that you saw, maybe you didn't, when you came in the door,